So, what was it like to live in a yoga temple, a Spatantriya temple, and why did I move there in the first place? We gotta get into it.
So this whole story starts with my mom. I absolutely love my mama. But we had to move into the temple to help her get out of some money situation. Also so she could have a surgery. But we'll get back to that later. So one of the reasons my mom wanted to move into the temple so badly was because she actually had real friends this time, and that needs a little bit further explanation.
So, my mom used to work in the car industry, and the car industry is not very friend intensive, so your friendships are very questionable, if that makes sense. The whole 9 yards. They're not very nice people, and they don't really know how to communicate well. So my mom didn't have any real friends, and she just hung out with me and my brother, which was awesome, but she also didn't have any real friends, so she thought people just sucked. So we tried to change that. I had this friend Hannah, I guess I still have, but she moved away. She actually went to this yoga temple before I had even heard about it, and they had this thing called a meal program. Now, if you don't know, me and my mom are vegan, and it's an all-vegan meal program, and it ends up being like $4.50 to $5 per meal, and they're Indian-sized portions, so they're huge. So I thought this was a really great opportunity for her to meet some new friends, but also it was a super awesome meal program for super cheap. Okay, so before all of this happened, my mom told me a lot of different things. Like, one of the things, for instance, is that she said she was only asexual. After she had me and my brother, she didn't want to have anyone else in a relationship because she said it was too much effort. She didn't want to go through with that. And now she has an awesome boyfriend. I'll get more into that story in a second too. So another thing that happened was that my mom, she constantly told me when I said she needed some friends that she said she didn't like people. She just wasn't a people person. But from her perspective, all the people she saw was negative, nasty people who cheated on their wives and just weren't nice people. So from her perspective, that's all that people were doing because she was at work all the time. So I would have that same ideology as well if that was all I was doing, and then the only two people in your life that were nice were the people you raised. Going to this temple, it was like super awesome because I've been trying to get her to have friends, and I was like, maybe she'll like this hippie community, and it ended up working. So we're going there now, and then I'll show you kind of where I lived and where my mom lived, and yeah, there's an awesome guy named Chris. Chris and his roommates ended up making us food. They're the sole reason that the meal program's still going on, and it's absolutely ridiculous how good the food is. On a side note, Chris, who's the guy who is in charge of the meal program, who makes all the food, he actually has he's making a food truck in Denton, Texas, and he eventually wants to go past Texas to like Austin, and then eventually like out of the States. But I'll leave a link in his Instagram description below. It's going to be called the Bad Vegan Food Truck, and he's going to have a good vegan food truck eventually too. This is the house we moved into. Hey, there you are, buddy. Hey, this is Christian here. Come here in the light. This is the guy I was talking about with the food truck. Link in the description. This is my mom's room. There's already somebody who moved in already. My mom and I and my brother had a 1,500 square foot house with a lot of stuff in it. And so my mom had to give a lot of stuff away and basically become a minimalist, and then fit all of her belongings into this one room. That's crazy. Same thing with me. My room was a little bit bigger, and it was in the back, and I'll show you that here in a second. This was the laundry room, no AC outlet here. But then, it's just a small little walk to where I used to live. This is where I lived for 6 months with my mom living in the house. Back to the story. And then my mom started coming around the temple, doing some intimacy classes, doing communication classes, the whole 9 yards, and just actually had a group of friends. And so for the first time, I never saw her at the house. It used to be she would come home at work and then she would sit down, pet the cats or the dogs, whatever, and she would go to bed and go back to work. But now she had this like intense drive. She just started going, and every time she'd be like, hey, I'm going to the temple, you wanna come? And I'd go with her for lunch on the weekends, and we'd have a really awesome time. And then the temple ended up having to move out of its current location. This wasn't the current location. And I needed people to house it. She came to me one day in February, so she'd been going to the temple since October. And then out of nowhere, she wakes me up in the morning and goes, hey, what do you think about selling the house? And I was like, well, yeah, that was the original plan, but a little bit later down the road, we're gonna get you a little bit more out of debt. And she said, well, what do you think about doing it right now? It's like, what if we just moved in with the temple? I just kind of told her, I was like, well, not really, but whatever makes you happy. I don't really care about the circumstances. Whatever we need to do to get you in a happier place to where you don't have to work 60, 90 hours a week, or sometimes even more, then let's do it. And so she said, hey, I'm gonna go ahead and talk to our Aunt Jean, which she's a real estate lady. I forget what that's called. She was in real estate, and she ended up getting us a really good deal. It ended up getting us out of around $80,000 in debt, but then it also gave my mom enough money for surgery. Although I didn't like it at the beginning, when I moved in, I got to meet all these beautiful people, and I learned so much from the temple. One of the biggest things I learned from the temple, and this is like one of the most important, is just accepting where people are. And I tried to be like super businessy when I was younger and tried to like, make my own business and do all this and that and wear a suit, and it just didn't end up working because it wasn't me. For people that weren't on the same page as me or weren't looking 3 to 5 years in the future and planning that, I just stopped hanging out with them instead of just accepting where they were at, even though they were enjoying life and they were happy where they were. That was probably the most important thing that the temple ever taught me. And then also, we're helping out, we're doing a lot of things. And the temple, we did a lot of things. I got to meet really great people. We made a garden. We have a watermelon orchard. The watermelon orchard is ecstatic. We had way too many watermelons, just the squirrels usually got to it before we did. We made 3 separate above ground gardens that had like squash, zucchini, tomatoes, peppers, you name it. There was a ton of stuff, carrots, and they're all different colors. It was super awesome. That to ecstatic dances, I never knew how awesome an ecstatic dance was. The temple has a lot to offer, and I'll link that in the description as well to their website, but it's a super awesome community. I love everyone here. So now we'll get into the actual stuff about the temple. So, one of the things about the temple is that there's a lot of people. And so when a lot of people come in and out, there's usually a little bit more drama. Now, not like astronomical, it wasn't bad. It happens in every group. What was the saying? The more cows in the pasture, the more cow poo you have. So obviously you're gonna have more poo that you have to deal with. It was a community, but nobody was in charge of anything. So if you had a problem, you just dealt with it through that person. Another thing I learned from the temple was cleaning up after myself. And I was generally a clean person, but when you're living with a bunch of people, if you just leave something, like say you have a bowl that you ate out of, if you rinse it and you didn't put it in the dishwasher or clean it and you just left it in the sink, if the other 9 people that live there did that, then you just would have a pile of dishes. You wouldn't know which ones were rinsed and which ones weren't. It just kind of taught me, do things while you're doing it, don't wait. And so when you have that thought, just go ahead and do it. Another thing that's super cool was all the yoga classes and all the spiritual classes. But most of the spiritual classes were just being happy with yourself and just self-love. So just loving yourself in a way that you haven't loved yourself before, and different ways you can, and why you weren't loving yourself. So The classes were super awesome. Also the psychology classes, those were really cool too. They ended up having like a lot of psychology classes because communication is super important, and that's what a psychology class is just understanding how people work and how to communicate effectively. At least that's kind of like my take on it. But yeah, they were super cool things. And so my mom ended up finding a guy named Dan. And Dan is an absolute beautiful human being. And they started seeing each other, and now they're life partners and they love each other a lot. And they just instantly clicked. And I've never seen my mom work that hard, other than like her like bust her ass to take care of me and my brother when we were younger. Living at the temple, the bathrooms. Bathrooms are sacred. You should always clean up after yourself. Living by yourself is a little bit different. You don't want to leave a trace, because if there's 9 people using the same bathroom, that's not a very, it can get messy really quick. But one of the things the temple did was we had chore charts. So everybody had their own designated day of the week that they would do daily chores, whether it was from sweeping to watering the garden, putting all the dishes away that were drying, putting all the food up that was out from lunch and dinner, wiping the counters, just like little everyday things. And then on Thursday, we'd have someone come in and deep clean the entire place. But you didn't have to do a lot because everybody kind of did their part. Another thing I learned about living in a yoga or a Spitantri temple, nobody judged you ever. If you wanted to do something, they let you do it. If you're just like, hey, let's do this, then you did it. If you had an idea, like we built a chicken coop in the backyard, and then we ended up getting rid of our chickens, but we have this super cool house that's on this chopped down tree. Another thing I learned from the temple, which is a lesson I always try and relearn, everyone makes mistakes. You should hold people accountable, but you should also practice forgiveness. I've seen a lot of people at their worst, and if I were to judge them at that, then I would have to be willing to have people judge me at my worst. And so I don't ever want anybody to judge me at my worst, because my worst is pretty bad. That was a really important lesson. I'm in this building, which isn't connected to anything. So we have our own AC system, but then I also have to walk into the temple to go to the bathroom. So I'm a dude, I'd obviously use the yard if I had to pee, but if I had to, go poo or shower, then I had to walk inside the temple. So that was a weird thing, especially when it was raining or when it was super cold. It didn't ever snow when I lived here. If you're looking to move into a yoga temple or a Spitantri temple or anything like that, I think communal living, it definitely has its places to learn. And I think it's a beautiful thing to do. Like for me, I got 6 months and I felt like I learned everything I could from the place. And so from then I had to move on. And then luckily my mom was wanting to move out as well, and it just worked perfectly. So I'm extremely happy, and I'd do it all over again if I had the choice. That's kind of the story about me living in a temple.
And Mama, I love you.
Mwah.